Hello and welcome to episode 11 of eSports Edition. I'm Alex Fletcher. And today I want to discuss how I feel instability at the professional player and team level in eSports is harming the overall industry as a whole. And for those who aren't familiar, basically there are very little controls surrounding who and how players and even teams are formed and the movement between those formations. So a lot of times across a number of major esports titles, after a large invitational or tournament, depending on the outcome or the results, there's a crazy amount of player shuffling, roster shuffling, entire rosters being dropped, picked up, player movement, and there's little to no controls surrounding who can move where, for what reasons. And a lot of it has to do with the lack of collective bargaining. The notion of player rights is non-existent. But I think not a bigger issue, but a more prominent issue is that no one's even attempted to mandate controls that are going to help stability. And in any competitive scene or quote-unquote sport, the competitive context is so key to things like storytelling, history. When we look back 10 years from now, the individual matchups that make competition worth keeping track of, that make it worth following, a lot of that is lost when you just have massive instability. You don't have a chance for sustained rivalries, and rivalries are huge to any sport, but especially for esports, as there's a move towards mainstream traction, and those stories are going to need to exist that pull the casual spectator in. And as we see esports as an industry continue to grow, the notion of non-gamers watching gamers play at the professional level, it's going to be important to make sure that you have that healthy level of stability. How else can someone who isn't a Dota 2 player step in and watch a huge event if preceding the event there's been just an inordinate amount of player movement, team instability? It's just impossible. And right now we're seeing mostly, or esports audiences consist of gamers, enthusiasts. But if the pot's ever to grow, if we're ever to see true mainstream acceptance and awareness, eventually you're going to need to reach out to people who aren't gamers, to people who aren't necessarily enthusiastic about specific game titles or gameplay specifics, but just want to know or just want to connect to the sport element. And having the stability that drives the competitive context, the history, and all of those other elements that the casual fan needs and wants is going to be incredibly big for the entire industry. Because if it doesn't exist and people just say, I can't keep up with all this, not only is it hard to follow the game itself, but it's hard for me to keep track of the players. It's hard for me to keep track of the teams, where different players play, where they've played. You're going to lose out a lot. And that's something that's going to affect the entire industry. It's not going to be a game title specific deal or a league specific deal. I listened to Richard Lewis. He did a very, very insightful vlog on why Riot Games, who's the publisher of League of Legends, which is the #1 esport today in the world, should do a better job of taking care of their players. And I thought it was great, and encourage everyone to look him up and look at that video for themselves. But the first thing I thought was, man, Riot is probably on the right side of the bell curve in terms of looking out for their players, right? In most esports, in most leagues, at the professional level, for most titles, there's no such thing as a salary. Entire rosters are dumped at the drop of a hat, and that's got to change. And hopefully we'll see the teams and the organizations prioritize that and realize that it affects them in a positive way to maintain more stability as opposed to less. And as we see stability for the individual players and then for the teams and then for the organizations grow, that's when the esport industry really is going to take off. Right now we're just seeing the beginning, but until that aspect of stability is addressed, we have a long way to go. So that's all I have for this week, and thanks for tuning in. I'll be back next time around. Thanks. Bye.